All right, we're recording.
All right.
Hey, Jason.
Hello, Bear.
Hey, this is Jason, everyone. He's the host of the future upcoming podcast, Rogue Elephant. And actually, I've talked about you a lot on my channel. Um, for those who don't know, Jason is actually the guy who helped me lose all this weight. We've talked before about the weight I've been losing and all that, and he's kind of the weight loss guru.
Ah, well, thank you.
Yeah. And he's also a fellow initiated the same mystery school that I'm a part of. So I thought it would be kind of fun to just hang out and visit. We don't really have anything super planned for the direction of this, but we thought it'd be fun to just visit and record and see how things go. So how you been,
We've
man?
been having these.
Go ahead.
I'm good, man. We've been having these really dynamic, meaningful conversations for like 2 years now, and I personally get a lot out of them. I can't count how many times I've hung up the phone from you and just been like, "Oh man, I just have all these ideas and all these new things that I'm chewing on,"
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes I'll even tell my wife, I'll be like, "Baron, I had this. Earlier we were talking about this." And then we connected the dots between this, and that, and they're immensely valuable for me. So hopefully we can recreate the same dynamic, and listeners will get something out of it too.
Yeah, I think it'd be fun.
Yeah, man. So what is an arcanum? You were explaining what an arcanum is to me, and I thought that was a good time to start recording.
Yeah, so an arcanum is something that must be known first before all other things can be known and understood in their appropriate contexts. So it's a little bit like saying if you want to be a brain surgeon, you have to know anatomy and physiology. Right? There's certain things in order to become a doctor that have to be understood before you could do anything in becoming a doctor. And the same thing goes with the mysteries, right? So like I'm working on the curriculum for the Odinic School of Mysteries Academy, and the very first lesson is called the first arcanum. It's one of the first things that a student learns just after they're initiated. It's like the very first. It's like the first secret that is told to them, and that's the fact that you are dead and this is the underworld. And without that basic first idea, nothing in any mystery school philosophy under the sun to which I'm aware, nothing could be understood without first understanding that basic idea. You can't understand the all-seeing eye. You can't understand a dying god myth. You can't understand, the concept of heaven. None of it is you can't understand it in its full context without first understanding that first.
So it's a foundational idea. Yeah, so it's like a foundational idea or a principle by which you can lay other ideas and principles on.
Yeah, exactly.
Built.
Yeah.
I had the benefit of learning the first arcanum, and it wasn't referred to as an arcanum as far as I'm aware. So to hear you use that language was interesting. But I can definitely support what you just said, because as I've been going through the tree and learning from the school, every idea that I learn builds upon the first lesson that I was taught, and I wouldn't understand any of them if I didn't figure out that first thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It all comes around full circle.
Yeah, it does. We have this, so everything is backwards in the way we're taught. We're taught first you're born and then you live and then you die. Right? Time is a very linear process, right? It's this straight line. And when you get the proper order down and you kind of grasp that concept that first you have to die, the first thing that happens is that you die and then you're born and then you live. It makes things it turns things into a cyclical nature of things. Death really isn't an end, it's the beginning of all things. And so That's why death symbols and esoteric philosophy are all so prevalent. That's why the Masons.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's why like the Masons, for example, everyone's interested in the Masons because they're the most famous. But Hiram Abiff, their dying god myth, they have him in a coffin. Hiram Abiff is in a coffin, and then he's resurrected by the Master Mason. It goes back to that same thing. When you're first initiated, you're informed that you're a dead man. You're in the base nature, and then it's only after you discover wisdom. It's through wisdom that you're actually born again and come into the light of gnosis.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, totally. So that's the thing that jumped out at me when you were just saying that is we talk a lot about how the tree is a torus.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a toroidal energy circle,
Mm-hmm.
So it would make sense that you can't get anywhere unless you start at the bottom. And it would also make sense that the bottom kind of can also be the top. It's a full cycle, and it's something that continually produces. But as soon as you remove one part of that, it stops working.
Exactly.
So it would make sense that you would have to start at the bottom in order to get the energy flow upward, which is as far as I can tell, that's the whole idea behind studying the tree, is to raise your consciousness and make your mind a more efficient, machine.
Yeah. And by the tree, you're talking about the world tree, Yggdrasil.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I say the tree now just because, since I've started learning at the school and I've started studying the world tree, the one that we study in the school, I start looking at all the other tree symbolism spread across other cultures and religions, and it's all the same, man. It's pretty profound.
Yeah, it's like buying a car and you start seeing it everywhere. Once you start looking, once you become familiar with it, then it becomes unescapable. Suddenly, every culture on the earth has a world tree. It's like one of the most ubiquitous symbols in mankind. I mean, ancient too.
Yeah.
We're talking like caveman drawings, Neolithic artwork, carved in stone on cave walls. I mean, it's been here forever. It's not like something that we just made up on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
So there's really something pretty important locked away in its mystery that is, yeah. it's fun and fascinating thing, and you never really quite get to the bottom of it either. You just kind of keep digging, and it keeps opening up to you.
It's a very, very interesting, to me, in my personal experience of studying it really is phenomenological in the sense that it's so profound and so complicated, but so practical. It really is just kind of like, whoa, when you start to, the more time you spend with it, the more time you study it, the more times that you see it appearing in your experience and you start identifying it. And not even just like the actual shape of a tree or like a drawing of a tree, but the ideas and the principles and the symbolism. Mm-hmm. Those things appear everywhere. It's nuts. It's like putting on a pair of glasses that allows you to see things that were not there before.
What's that movie that had that? It's really famous where he puts on the glasses. I don't know why what you said just made me think of that. It's going to drive me crazy now.
Well, regardless,
he puts on the sunglasses and all of a sudden he sees all the subliminal images everywhere.
I wasn't aware that was a movie.
I don't remember. It's going to drive me crazy, though.
The idea of a veil or the idea of a lens is a very common theme in yogic philosophy and a lot of the stuff that I study. Mm-hmm. They talk a lot about removing the veil or removing the illusion. And what they're saying is that ideas and beliefs filter your reality and filter your experience. So in yoga, we work to remove those because the idea is that when they're all gone, your state becomes peaceful because naturally we just want to be peaceful and sort of restful, right? If you remove all...
go ahead and finish.
The tree to me is like intentionally putting on a better lens. Whereas I've spent the last 3 years studying lenses, learning a tree to me was like getting a sweet new pair of like medical sunglasses that allow me to see things better and more clearly. So it's very, very interesting.
Like, what do you mean? Can you give me an example, like what you mean?
Yeah,
it
man.
doesn't have
So
to be
like I'm
like,
sitting.
it doesn't have to be like from your personal life, but just like an example of like what you mean by like using the tree to kind of see stuff that you haven't seen before.
Yeah, absolutely. So like we just talked about how the tree is a torus, and a torus is a energy cycle, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a something that can produce energy on its own when it's in its incomplete form, and it returns energy to itself. It's a closed circuit. So that means that the basis of it is a cycle. So for me personally, the thing that I've gotten the most out of it is realizing that everything's a cycle. Every day is a cycle. Your emotions are cycles. Your troubles are cycles. They all start somewhere, go somewhere, and then dissipate, and then a new cycle starts over again, and it never stops. That idea in itself has been very, very helpful for me in reminding me to not get too caught up in things that are happening in my personal life, and just to see the big picture of things. The general idea that everything is a cycle, which is what the tree represents, has been very, very, very helpful to me in my experience. I have lots of practical examples as well. Emotions and things are my favorite, because that's the thing that I work on myself the most. Is I'm just trying to work on my mind and my emotional state. So I take the principles of the tree and I apply that to my emotions when I get too caught up. I take a step back and I go, okay, what is this really? And the tree can pretty much answer anything that I'm unsure about. If I can take the tree and I look at the tree for a minute and I figure out how whatever it is that I'm trying to figure out fits into that, it gives me language and it helps me understand.
Mm-hmm.
That would be the best way to describe it.
And we have if you go to the awesome website, and it'll be posted down below. If you're listening to this on YouTube, it'll be in the description box. Actually, it'll be in the description box if you listen to it on the podcast too. All the diagram of the tree is on there. So if you're kind of curious what we're talking about, you could go and it's free to download if you want it. Everything on there is absolutely free. You could take it, copy it, show it to your friends, call it your own. Nothing's copyrighted. Do what you want. But yeah, so like the way the trees.
Real quick. If anybody's going to download the tree and they're interested in it at all, I'm sure that you're okay with this, but I'd like to offer myself up and just say, if you are interested in studying the tree and you have questions, I would like to make myself available if anybody's curious. You guys can reach out to me directly, and we'll figure out a way to do that.
Okay.
Because I love sharing it with people and talking about it, and I'm sure you feel the same way, Bear.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's what I do.
Yeah.
This is the whole point of all of this. So
yeah, don't be strangers, guys.
So the tree. So let's kind of break this down a little bit. So the Yggdrasil, we're talking specifically now about the mystery school symbology. So like if you go and try and like look at the Edda, for example, by Snorri Sturluson, you're not going to really find this in there. I always say a lot that try and tell people that the mysteries of Odin, which is the mystery school that both Jason and I are part of, we're not reconstructionists. We're not trying to recreate some old religion. This information was passed down to me from my teacher. Jason got a lot of it from me, and he got a lot of it from other sources, and just being a part of the mystery school and learning and that kind of stuff. So if you're going to try and like look it up in the myths, you're going to have a hard time. But that's just a brief disclaimer.
It's designed that way on purpose, though.
Yes.
Right. There's a reason why you can't go and Google the tree and have somebody break it down, because it takes real work to understand it. And the entire idea behind it is that you have to do the work. So we're really fortunate in the fact that nobody has gone through and decoded this, and that the people who understand it have chosen to keep it a secret on purpose, because you don't get the goods without doing the work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As Jordan Peterson says, you don't get the gold without the dragon.
There you go.
I love that quote a lot.
Yeah, me too.
Anyway, so it's really broke up. Like if you look at it, it's really broken up into 4 major sections. You have the first section where the roots would be is called the underworld. And this is where the bulk of the work happens for new initiates. This is where the new initiates live. If you're in the, let's say if you're a Mason, just, this isn't a perfect apples to apples comparison, but if you're the Mason, this would be the equivalent of like the Blue Lodge Masonry, like the first three degrees of Freemasonry. So like kind of the lower tier, and it's called the underworld section. And if you look at you could go online, like I said, and look at the picture. There's 3 roots that kind of show up on here, and they're one is basically law, knowledge of law, universal law. The other one is knowledge of it's, how do you put it? What's a good way of putting it? It's it's personal, it's experiential knowledge. So it's where one side will be learning like reading the book The Kabbalion, for example, and learning universal law and the way that laws work, where the other side is things like meditation, and yoga and some of these other practices that take the law and you use it in a very personal way. And then the third branch, the center branch, the center root. Holy crap! I completely lost.
It's okay.
What the heck is it called? The center root.
Yes, there's the 3 roots, and the center root is
the it represents the outgrowth of the other 2, right? So you take the law, take the experiential knowledge, like through yoga and meditation and some of this stuff, and that's the outgrowth of those 2 things. So you have, like you would say, like the sacred masculine, which is things that are quantifiable on a piece of paper on one side. On the other side, you have the sacred feminine, which is knowledge that isn't quantifiable. Things like love and compassion and, a mother's hug and these sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
Truth, for example, things that you can't just write on a piece of paper and say this means that. When those 2 things come together, and you'll see that they come to a point that represents the physical outgrowth of those 2 concepts. Does that make sense?
And what happens when it does? And the symbolism for it, the way it's represented, is a triangle, isn't it?
It is. Yep.
That's really interesting.
It's Odin's spear, Gungnir. It's the thing that makes effectual change in the universe. Without wielding the spear, you can't make change.
Fantastic. So it's like the knowledge plus the action and the emotional response creates the experience.
Exactly.
Kind of.
So yeah, it's like, let's say you want to make a cup of coffee, right? You have so the sacred feminine is the part that actually creates something. She's the one who gives birth to something. So the sacred feminine is always the one that comes up with the good ideas. And you'll wake up in the morning and you smell that brisk winter air blowing through your window because you sleep with your window open like I do. And even when it's like 20 degrees outside. And you smell that beautiful air and you go, what sounds really great is a cup of coffee. And the sacred masculine will go, oh, we're making coffee? All right, I need to get the beans. I need to get out the grinder. I need to grind it to this particular thickness. I need to, put it in the coffee maker. I need to set it to this length of time. And then the sacred feminine go, oh, wouldn't it be great what if we add cream? Oh, cream would be so delicious in this cup of coffee. Wouldn't that be great to have cream in this nice winter day? We could sit by the windowsill and read a book while drinking this coffee with cream. And the sacred masculine will go, okay, we're getting cream. Okay, I need to open the fridge. I need to find the cream. I need to pour this much. I need to pour a cup and a half. I don't know, a teaspoon or two into the cup. And so these two are basically having sex with each other. These two parts of your mind are having sex with each other. And the end result is what we would call like the beloved son, or Balder, for example, in the Norse myths. He's he's the cup of coffee, right? He's the thing that was created and made into physical reality out of that mental phenomenon, is what he represents. And that is that center, that's that center root that if you look at the world tree, it's kind of that center root that you're looking at. That's what he represents. He's the cup of coffee.
That's really interesting. Hearing you describe that made me think a lot about some of the yoga philosophy that I've studied. And it's really interesting. The chakra system is also a world tree in the sense that it
it totally is.
It compares the physiology of the human body to a tree, and the energy starts at the bottom, right? Like with the lesson 1, and it works its way up, and it has multiple stages. And a lot of the things that you just said, I was drawing all these comparisons and going, holy crap, they're talking about the same thing. In the Yoga Sutras, it actually says that your mind is made of 3 parts. There's the part that remembers. Yeah, man. Like hearing you say that, I'm like, holy shit. So there's the part of your mind that decides that it wants something and figures out how to get it. And then there's the part of your mind that remembers that you like coffee and remembers that one time that you made coffee and sat and read a book and how nice that would be. And together the two things come and it motivates you to go and take action and experience, and more importantly, the emotional response to experience is how we change our physiology. That's like how we effectively go in and change our genetics and train our mind. That's how habits are formed. So I got a question for you. Sure. There's a lot of talk in our culture today about unhealthy, sexual energy, let's call it. How often do people have those two forces working properly in their mind? And what happens if they're not balanced or they don't work together effectively?
How much time do you have?
See if you can cut the fat. Like, I think I could. I don't want to answer my own question, but I'm really curious to hear what you have to say, because I know that for me personally, the last couple of years of my life have been about acknowledging the fact that those two forces, the masculine and feminine, are not balanced and don't work very effectively in my mind. And my whole thing has been learning how to balance them and learning how to incorporate more feminine energy into my experience to create a better outcome. So like if somebody, let's just say that somebody doesn't have enough masculine or they don't have enough feminine, what's the outcome there?
So there's actually, give me just a second here. Let me try and formulate the way I want to put this.
Yeah, it's a loaded question, man.
Yeah, it is. It could be a whole, I don't know. This is what the mysteries are made out of. So it's like, how far down the rabbit hole do you want to go? Okay, so
I want to.
Let's back
go ahead.
So all esoteric symbology, all of it always represents. It doesn't matter which symbol you pick out. We'll say the all-seeing eye, for example, because everyone knows what the all-seeing eye is. It always represents 3 things at once. You have it represents something physical in the human body, a physical organ in the human body. It represents a mental phenomenon, and a spiritual function. So
Wow.
every symbol it represents three things at once. And because your man is three, you always come back to this number, the number three. Man is three things. So it's one of the things that are known in the mysteries is that there's this. I know that at the offset, this doesn't sound like I'm answering the question, but we have to go through this real quick to be able to answer it effectively. So there's this idea, one of the most misunderstood keys used in the mysteries is as above, so below. A lot of people believe that means that, that it means bringing hell to earth or something like that. That's not at all what it means. It means essentially what it's saying is that everything is fractal, right? If you want to understand something on a bigger level, you understand something on the lower level. But basically, it means that patterns repeat themselves, right? So you have an atom, for example, and then you have as an energy source, and then electrons that surround it, and then you have a cell with an energy source and organs that surround it, and you have a human body with a heart and organs that surround it, and you have a solar system with a sun and planets that surround it. So every step along the way, patterns repeat. So the way the ancient esotericists decided that the way to understand everything is to have a base point, a one point in place and time that we could understand. If we understand this one thing, all other things can be understood. Like we said, it's like an arcanum, and really you could probably almost call it the second arcanum, and that is the fact that the human body was known as the symbol of symbols, and that's like an actual phrase you hear coming up all the time. The human body is a symbol of symbols. It's the thing that all things are measured off of. So if you want to know, like there's this really famous saying written on the wall of the oracle at Delphi, I think was attributed to Pitha, I think was her name. It says, if you to know yourself and you'll know the gods in the universe. And so basically what it's saying is, if you understand the body, the human body, by this simple idea that all patterns repeat themselves, but understanding the body, even though you may not understand the totality of what God is, you can use it as a little bit of a window to peek behind the curtain and to get some idea on what you're dealing with. And so when you... Let me make sure I get myself back on track.
Big ideas take time.
Yeah, it's really easy for me to go off on rabbit trails. So the original question is, what does it look like when someone isn't in balance? So if we understand that the human body is a roadmap, right? And if you look at the organs in the body, it's a fractal system. That there's actually 4 major parts of the brain. And this is kind of where I'm going to with this. If you can look at the brain and use this as a roadmap. You have the lower brain, which is the Abdullah or the lizard brain. That's the lowest. That was like the first brain that they think formed, right? It's responsible for fight or flight. It's responsible for the need to feed. It's responsible for the need to procreate. It's the part of you that wants to have sex with everything. That's that part of the brain. It's responsible for keeping you alive. It's the animal function of the brain. But sitting right on top of that is the midbrain. And the midbrain, so the lower brain is gendered as masculine. And we could go into why it's gendered masculine later on. But that's a whole other discussion. The lower brain is masculine. The midbrain is feminine. And it sits right on top of that phallic lower brain. And the middle brain is responsible for emotion and sexual attraction, but in a romantic sense. So it's not just I want to have sex with something because I want to have sex with something. It's I want to have sex with you because I love you. Right. That's where that
Hmm.
comes out of. Um, and so these two things, they, the way the story goes, these two things mate with each other. Right. The sacred the masculine lower brain and the feminine midbrain, they mate with each other. Like we were just talking about a second ago, those two parts of the brain, they mate and they have the beloved son, that divine being that takes the qualities of its parents and becomes not only both of those things at once, but makes both of them better. And that gives birth to they give birth to the neocortex, the top part of the brain that is responsible for reason, thought, and higher levels of thinking. So you can, um, uh, in the Masons, actually, for example, they would call that the birth. What do they call it? It's the oh the birth of the widow's son, I think is what they call it. For some reason, the exact phraseology is I'm missing it for some reason. But the birth of the widow's son. So basically, what's supposed to happen is that that lower masculine part will die off in order to have a fully functional neocortex that is in balance, right? So
Hmm.
again, you asked. I know I've been talking for a while, but you asked what happens if something is imbalanced. Well, you have to have in every everything has to have its mate, right? Nothing exists by itself. It has to have a pair of some things. And so if you are too far, if you give too much power to the sacred masculine, for example, right? Instead of being married to its spouse, it will attach itself to that lower brain. It'll attach itself to the the masculine. The masculine will attach itself to the other masculine part of the brain, which is um, the Abdullah. And what happens when you have that? Well, you get people who are psychopathic, who are domineering, who are aggressive, who
Narcissistic.
narcissistic. We're talking like the big swing dicks of business, right? It kind of gives birth to like the satanic worldview, where if you have to step on someone's throat to get to where you're going, then so be it. Emotion is completely removed from the equation. It's everything is cold, hard logic. Everything is hyper masculinized. It's like a total destruction of the sacred feminine, all that stuff, right? So you
Hmm.
become um, completely unbalanced, and you become basically the.
Donald Trump. No, kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah, well, yeah, you become kind of the the hyper aggressive, over aggressive, emotionally stunted person, right? We've all met these guys, right? These people who don't have any ability to even have an emotion or be to identify an emotion. Everything is just what I want, what I need. You know, screw the rest of you. But on the other
Yeah.
side, if you're too far on the sacred feminine side, the same thing happens where your part of your mind, the two parts of the mind will. Um, I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted because my cats are freaking out. Um,
Well, the masculine is the rational part of your brain. So that there's a rational part, the masculine, the creative part, the feminine. So
so
if
the
you have the creative emotional side, but you don't have the rational action doing side, then you can't actually like make anything happen.
yes, exactly. So the sacred feminine of the neocortex will marry the sacred feminine of the midbrain, and then you have the opposite problem where without having the sacred masculine there to regulate the creative portion, it just vomits creation. Everything is just pure emotion. Right.
Yes.
So
that's like somebody who's overly emotional and can't really get very much done in their life because their emotions kind of rule everything.
Yeah, like we've met people.
Yeah.
We've met people who are just so in love with creating things that they never finish anything. Right. We've met people who are so reactionary that they can't actually think through a problem. They just react to something that's right in front of them. Right. Oh, you said this. Oh my God. They can't sit and actually mull anything over. And it creates, so on one side, you create the domination, hyper-masculine, aggressive person. And the other side, you basically create someone who's kind of a slave. Because their emotions won't allow them to actually ration anything out. And so you have like this really interesting dynamic where you have this two, like we can almost kind of see this with geopolitics in general, where you have like this kind of the split of these people who, you have some people on one side who don't have enough emotion to go around, and you have the other side who have too much emotion to go around, and one side just kind of eats the other side alive. And that's not healthy. You have to have, in order to be fully balanced, to have, it's called the upward pointed spear in the Norse mysteries, or to achieve the all-seeing eye, basically, is you have to have a perfect balance of both of those things. You have to have the sacred masculine who's there to tell the sacred feminine what is good and is not good to put in the cup of coffee, right? The sacred feminine will be like, let's put asparagus in the coffee. It'll be great. Oh, it'll be wonderful. It'll be healthy. And the sacred masculine will go, no. Don't put asparagus in your coffee. That's not good. It won't taste good. Don't do that. So both are required to exist together in order to have a functional person who isn't a crazy person.
Okay, cool.
I know that was
you covered a lot of ground there.
I know. I'm sorry.
No, you answered my question beautifully. So I have a few things came to mind when you were saying that. We see that same dynamic that you were just talking about with the masculine and feminine part of the brain. We see that playing out in relationships in real life. And it doesn't even necessarily need to be about the man and the woman. Generally, in a relationship with two people, if the relationship is healthy, there's one person who's a little more creative, a little more emotional, and another person who's a little more practical and more action-oriented, right?
Yeah.
And you see relationships where one person, is way over on one side and the other person is way too much the other way, and they can't seem to meet in the middle, so the relationship doesn't progress. I see that, that happens a lot, especially in marriages and even in friendships, where there's not a unity between the two different aspects, and the relationship gets kind of stale, and eventually it, ends up falling apart if they don't reconcile that. And I was thinking again while you're saying that, I've had points in my life where I know for a fact that my energy is way off balance because I'll have lots of good ideas, but I can't seem to execute on any of them. Or it'll be, and that would be an example of my energy being too feminine. And then I'll also go through phases where everything is practical and utilitarian, and I'm just doing, but I'm not stopping to appreciate it, and I'm not stopping to actually experience it and, allow it to guide my behavior. I'm just focused on getting it done.
And usually when you're in that kind of mode of thought, you're not creating anything new.
No, you're just kind of maintaining.
Yeah, that's the thing. The sacred masculine, it can't create anything new. Only the sacred feminine can do that. The sacred masculine is basically just a calculator. It wants it functions in a way that keeps, it's like I said, if it's quantifiable on a piece of paper, if you can write down and do the math, for example, on a piece of paper, that's a sacred masculine trait. The sacred feminine is the part that comes up with the new ideas. So
Interesting.
if you get too far onto one side or the other, you end up really shooting yourself in the foot because you can't create anything new, because if it's too much sacred feminine, you're kind of spinning your wheels because there's no details laid down. You just vomit creation all over the place. But if you're too much sacred masculine, then you can't get anything done because it doesn't have a capability of creating anything. It's a masculine thing. So they both have to be mated pairs. And that's where Hugin and Munin come in. That's Odin's mated pair of ravens. It's the same principle at work. Thought and memory, right? Thought is masculine and memory is feminine. We see that same thing repeated over and over and over again in the Norse mysteries.
It's really interesting. A lot of the concepts and ideas that you just shared are in yoga as well.
Explain that.
In fact, everything that you just said is. So the spectrum of masculine versus feminine mental processing that you were just talking about, it's a spectrum, right? So sometimes you're more on one side versus the other. And as far as I can tell, this applies to anybody with a mind. So if you have a brain and it's functioning, then, you're somewhere on the spectrum, whether or not you're aware of it. The first thing that I did was observe the fact that there was a spectrum and then figure out where I was. So I think just being able to do that and acknowledge the fact that the reason why every day is a little different and the reason why life is so trying is because, you fluctuate on that spectrum. And if you don't allow yourself to fluctuate, if you don't allow yourself to have any emotions and you don't allow yourself to create, it can manifest itself in a lot of negative ways. So it's really important to try to figure out where you're at and make some sort of conscious effort to balance yourself mentally as much as you can, right? You're not going to be perfect at it, and there's no objective metric to measure where you're at on the scale yet. But if you take a little bit of time to reflect, any person, if they take a little bit of time to reflect and go, how am I doing today mentally? You can figure it out relatively quickly, So in yoga, they talk a lot about balance. It's all about balance. Everybody thinks it's sexy stretches. It's not at all. The sexy stretches are a tool that you use to balance your physiology because your mind and your body are connected. We know that for sure, right? So the general idea... No,
you don't get to do yoga.
No. So the stretching is just, we're identifying the fact that our mind and our body are connected and that it's in our best interest, if we want to have a good experience of our lives, to balance our body so that our mind functions more effectively. Because nobody is at their peak mentally when they feel like shit or if their body hurts. I mean, even if you're having the best day ever, if your back suddenly starts to hurt, that's going to be the most significant thing in your life, right? It's going to snap you right out of wherever you are, and your entire experience is going to be about the fact that your back hurts. So if your physical body feels good, we know for a fact that you're going to feel better mentally. We see that in, like, for example, people with bipolar disorder or people with depressive disorders. The number one recommendation for them is exercise. Exercise is the most effective non-pharmaceutical approach to managing stress and bipolar that we have currently. And that's basically just saying, well, if your mind feels like shit and you can't get your way out of that, you can work on your body instead. Go for a walk, go for a run, sweat a little bit, do some yoga, take a cold shower. All of those things will put you in a better mental state almost immediately.
Well, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So the chakra system, you were talking about the lower three branches or so, like the roots.
Yes.
And you said that there's 4 parts of the brain. Well, the lower 4 chakras are all associated with physical experience. So most people, their energy, so to speak, we use that term lightly because it's not something that we can really measure yet. But the basic idea is that if you're too masculine and you're only concerned about getting laid, eating, having money, and acquiring things, your energy is more centered in your lower chakras or even your lowest, right? Because the lowest part of that is what deals with survival instincts and making sure that you stay alive, like you were just saying. And as you progress your energy upward, as you work on yourself, you work on your physical body, you work on your awareness, you start learning how to identify fluctuations in your mind, your energy slowly starts to move upward. And more importantly, when you make it a practice, like practice is a huge, huge part of yoga. Any good teacher and any book will recommend, they call it sadhana, and they're just saying, it's not something that you do and you figure out and you're there. It's something you continue to do. And in the ancient texts, it actually says you do this for a long time and that's it. So they don't say like you do it for 3 years and then you're there. They just say this is something that you do now. Get used to it. And what they're alluding to is the fact that your energy is constantly fluctuating, your mind is constantly fluctuating, and yoga gives you tools to identify where you're at on that spectrum and do things to improve your overall balance and make yourself more harmony in your physiology between your mind and your body, and more importantly, like your emotions, because emotions are the filter that all of your experiences will come through. You know, if it's a beautiful day outside, but you're depressed, you're not going to get any of the benefits of that because you're too in your own head. Just as an example. So it's really interesting to see how what you're talking about and what's in the mystery school ties back into yoga, which is one of the most well studied and preserved systems of maintaining all of these things that we still have today. Yeah. It's really interesting that they come together.
Yeah, I learned a lot of that stuff from you because I didn't come up from the, I didn't know anything about the Eastern stuff until we started talking.
I didn't know anything about any. Yeah, I didn't know anything about. I mean, that's really where everything that I've learned focused from. So pretty much everything you share with me is profound. I'm like, oh wow, I didn't know that. But it's really cool when one idea or one school of thought supports another one. Mm-hmm. The ideas line up and they mesh. Like when you have an idea and it resonates across multiple different schools of thought and different ideas and philosophies, that's how you know that you're onto something, especially if they're from different periods in time. Yoga is very, very, very old, 1,500 to 2,000 years or something like that. I don't know how old Norse mythology is. Do we know like when the first, I don't know anything about it. How old is it?
No one really, here's the thing. No one really knows. The oldest texts that we have, like the reason that a lot of the Northern European knowledge was lost is because they hold to the precept that the mysteries are always and only to be taught orally. So for the first 1,000 years or so, all the stories were just taught mouth to mouth, mouth to ear, not mouth to mouth, mouth to ear from generation to generation. And it was only until like maybe 750 AD, AD, that the first texts were ever written down. And that's why we know so little about like the Celtic mythology, for example. We know a little bit, but a lot of what we know is really heavily impacted. Really, we know a lot of it because of the priests, the Catholic priests that came to convert the populations. And so a lot of it's heavily biased. It was recorded by Christians. And so it's really tough. So
the answer is fundamentally it's old.
It's old, but it's
very old.
What's fascinating. So if you just do, if you take away, we'll say like the religious portion of it, you take away the stories, you take away all these things, and you just do like a character study of not only the characters involved, but the general overarching themes that we find in the stories one of the things I personally have discovered by going through this, and there's going to be a scholar out there somewhere who's not going to agree with me, of course, and that's fine. A lot of people aren't going to agree with me on this. But there is more in common with ancient Norse mythology, has more in common Norse mythology and Celtic mythology has more in common with Old Kingdom Egypt than it does with any of the religions that came out of there. More in common with ancient Egypt than we have, like with Greek, for example, or Roman, or even like Christianity and some of this other stuff. It's really bizarre, and I wish I knew why that happened.
Well, I mean,
but
we both hold to
similar.
the idea that most of the religion and philosophy and ideas and things that have survived and that we still have present today have their roots in Egypt.
At least, for sure.
Yeah, it seems if you trace them back, I mean, we don't know the exact dates for when these things came to fruition, these ideas and stuff that we study. But if you trace them all back to the source, it doesn't take very long. I mean, you could spend 20 minutes on Google, and if you study a little bit of fundamental like pagan idealism and philosophy and ideas and stuff, and then you study anything else, it doesn't take much to draw the connection. So, it's fair to say like the oldest source that we have was probably there, at least as far as I can tell. A lot of the ideas in yoga are the same way too. I feel like there's a little bit of a lag in our when we're talking, maybe.
Yeah, I think there probably is. Like for
okay,
example, so like a good example of what we're talking about here is that what's really unique about Norse mythology and Egyptian mythology is that both the god the father character and his son have their own dying god myth, and that's very unusual. So like in Egyptian mythology, for example, Osiris was murdered, goes to the underworld, and then is essentially resurrected later on by his wife Isis and his son Horus. But then his son Horus also has his own dying god myth where he dies every day because he's the sun. He's the sun up in the sky. You could point, if you want to go see Horus, you just look outside and look at the sun. He dies every day at Set, via Set, the sun set, and then is born again at the horizon, Horus's zone. And so the Horus and Osiris both have dying god myths, and which is very unusual. And the only other place I've really found that any great detail is in the Norse myths, with Odin having his dying god myth, and Balder, his son, also having a dying god myth. And Balder, of course, is the same god basically as Horus. He's the bright and shining sun outside, which ties it back into the underworld, because Horus and Balder get sent to the underworld, and that's where we see them. Like if you want to meet Balder, for example, the Norse god Balder, you just look outside and see the sun out there. He's dwelling in the underworld just like we are.
That's really interesting. So between Norse mythology and Egyptian mythology, it does the dying god mythology, is he resurrected in both of those the same way he is in Christianity? Or does he come back to life?
Yes.
That's interesting.
The dying god myth is one of the most ubiquitous myths in all of mythology. It's everywhere. You could close your eyes, spin around, and spit, and you'll hit a dying god myth. They're like freaking everywhere. You have Theseus, for example, who descends into the underworld to kill the Minotaur. He goes what's called the labyrinth, but it's essentially the same imagery. He ties a rope around his waist. Odin is hung from a tree. That rope imagery that shows up over and over again. Jesus is murdered and descends to the underworld. Ishtar descends to the underworld and has to be rescued and is brought back to life. Thoth descends to the underworld and to the halls of Amente, where he dwells before he comes back to life again. Quetzalcoatl, freaking.
So it's everywhere, huh?
I mean, it's everywhere. You can't. It's, Odin. He goes to the underworld constantly. In fact, they. There's kind of a tongue-in-cheek joke that Loki says about Frigg, Odin's wife. Odin's always gone, and so Frigg sleeps around. And so the Loki, the Norse chaos god, kind of giving her a hard time, says that there isn't anyone, god or slave, that she hasn't slept with. Because Odin is gone all the time. He's off in the underworld more often than he is in Asgard. And so, I mean, that's one of his names is the Wanderer. So it's he's kind of the proto-shaman in that way. So, I mean, the Dying God myth is freaking ubiquitous. It's everywhere. And that's really and that's the big dirty little secret of the Mystery Scrolls, is that you represent the Dying God myth. Right. Jesus said, pick up your cross and follow me. You die on the crossing just like Jesus dies on the crossing. You hang on the world tree. In our mysteries, we say you put your head through the noose and you hang on the world tree until you see the runes and you come to life again. And that's the dirty little secret, is you represent that figure. You're the person who has fallen and has died, and now through gnosis and through knowledge, you get to be resurrected and take up your first estate in the heavens where you belong. And so it's that. The symbolism gets really thick there in a hurry.
So I want to, that's really interesting. So I want to, maybe next time we talk, we could revisit the spectrum of mental fluctuation on a day-to-day basis, kind of like we were talking about. Mm-hmm. But I am really curious. I want to pick apart or explore the symbology and the ideas and the metaphors that are hidden in the Dying God myth, because we start out the conversation by talking about cycles, right? Mm-hmm. And in the Dying God myth, you have your figurehead, and they go through and they do their thing, and then they die, mm-hmm. and then they come back, right?
Yep.
It's a cycle.
Yes.
So
first you die, then you're born, then you live.
There you go. So the Buddhists say that every day, every second, every minute, every thought, everything that you experience is a tiny little cycle, that our entire life is just made of cycles. We could break that down even to the day. So when you go to sleep, you don't die, but where do you go? Your consciousness isn't in your body. You're dreaming somewhere.
That's a really good question.
Yeah. So I want to talk about that a little bit, because a lot of people take the Bible as a literal translation, and I'm not going to, it's not my place to say if that's correct or not, but I think that it's what we should really be doing is looking at these texts and looking at the symbolism and the metaphors. What are the ideas that they're trying to convey to us? Mm-hmm. Jesus is the story of Jesus. That's my favorite, because it's very common, especially in our culture in the United States. And it's, it's something that almost everybody knows a little bit about. So I usually revert to that because people can relate and pick it up pretty quickly.
Sure.
I don't have to explain who is what. So Jesus studies, and, he's raised Jewish, and he becomes our savior, right? And he goes out and advocates for people, and he spends his time with the poor, and he says, he makes all these profound revelations and performs all these miracles and things, and then he goes and dies, and he comes back. Mm-hmm. Every single day, we wake up and we have the opportunity to do better than we did yesterday. We have the opportunity to be a little bit better. We have the opportunity to be reborn in a sense, right? Even in the fact, like the way that we respond to situations, if we have something that's happening to us over and over again, and we keep responding the same way, we just keep dying and coming back, right? But the second that we bring our consciousness and our awareness into it, and we choose to respond differently, then we're being reborn a little bit better, right?
Yes, you're ascending into the realm of the gods at that point.
Yeah. So like, I want to talk about I want to explore a little bit like the dying god myth, and how does that relate to us in our daily lives? And what can we learn from it? You know, like how can we use that to improve our experience and be better for the people around us? I think I've been listening to a lot of lectures from Jordan Peterson. I'm not a big politics guy, but I love his philosophy, and I love the way he breaks down different literature and philosophy and makes all these connections. And he's an amazing speaker. And the thing that
popular again.
Yeah, I think he's I think he's well on his way to becoming like one of the great philosophers of our time, just because of how well versed he is, and how he embodies all of these things that a good philosopher should. But the thing that he keeps pointing out in all these lectures that I'm listening to is that we need not concern ourselves with other people at all, in the sense of like comparing ourselves, which is a big problem in our society and our culture today because of social media. But he says that all we need to do is be better than the person we were 5 minutes ago.
Yes.
Or yesterday. And as long as you do that, i.e., like die on the cross for what you believe in, make sacrifice, and as a result, you get to be reborn again a little bit better, right?
Exactly. Yep. And then that's
Go ahead.
That's very much a Pythagorean. The Pythagoreans did that in the cult of Pythagoras. They would rise every day with the sun, and would greet the sun in the morning, and would make plans for their day. And then at night, their nightly ritual included, what did I do wrong, and how could I do it better? And
reflection.
Just adopting a simple ritual like that will make your life so much better. Because you look at your day and saying, okay, this is where I fell, right? And and I don't want to do that again. And so every day you're a better person than you were the day before. And that's climbing the ladder. That's climbing Jacob's ladder. That's one of the things that people don't understand, is that ascension, people that say, I want to ascend, I want to achieve ascension, I want to be, raised to a higher plane of existence. But it's always far away from now. Salvation doesn't happen now. It's some other point after I die and go to heaven. And that's not the case. Ascension happens now. It's a ladder. It's something it's a mountain that you slowly climb. And that it happens every day, and every time you make a decision. And every time you learn something new, you're ascending. It's not.
So it's just about orienting yourself. It's just about orienting yourself and your actions in the world in a positive direction.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's not about the end goal. It's just about having as much positive output as you can, whether that be being better for people around you, learning, or just being better than you were yesterday. That's ascension. And it's an ongoing process. Just like I was saying earlier in yoga, the most important part is that you do it that you do it for a long time consistently. It's basically just saying that it doesn't stop. It needs to become something that you embody and practice on a regular basis. Are you familiar? I'm sure you know a little bit about Marcus Aurelius, right?
Yeah, I do. I know a little bit about him.
So you were just talking about the ritual of did you say Pythagorean cult?
Yes.
So there's this, I read this, it was basically a breakdown. There's been a couple books written on it, but Marcus Aurelius had some amazing habits and things. He was a Stoic philosopher.
That's what I was going to say. I thought he was the one who invented Stoicism.
Yeah, and stoicism's fucking cool. And if anybody listening hasn't, doesn't know what stoicism is, it's worth 20 minutes of your time. Watch a couple of YouTube videos or read a couple articles on that just kind of summarize it, because it's really cool. And there's a lot of really profound, simple ideas, and it's ultra practical. You can apply it right now. But Marcus Aurelius, his habits, he had a very specific ritual that he would do every day. And I'm not sure what the timeline looks like with the Pythagoreans or if they were related or not, but his nighttime ritual was the reflective period of sitting there and going, okay, like, what did I do right today? What did I do wrong today? And he had some very specific instructions. I don't want to, mess them up, but it was something along the lines of like, the thing that I handled incorrectly, how could I have handled it better? Or he would pick somebody that he idolized or looked up to or respected, and he would go, how would they have handled it?
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't even need to be your whole day. It can be one thing. It can be one thing that you're like, man, I wish I would have done that better. Just the simple act of taking your intention and your awareness and putting it on something that happened to you during your day and using your mind to go, how could I have done that better? You are setting yourself up for success.
And actually following through is the key component of that.
Yeah. It's really difficult to be consistent in rituals and things, especially in our culture where everything's so fast and everything needs to happen right now and everybody's stressed out, But the simple act of doing that reflecting at night can be immensely helpful. And if, what's helped me do it is I have a partner that I do it with. I do it with my wife. And she asks me, like, did you reflect on the day? And if I didn't, she'll say, well, stop what you're doing and do it right now because it takes 5 minutes. And I swear that'll be like the best 5 minutes that you spend with your entire day is just reflect on the day. And it really allows you to kind of like be done, let it go, like you extract the good stuff, you figure out where you could have done better. And it really allows you to kind of like wrap the day up and just be done with it. And then you feel like the next day you're more prepared, because you took the time to get the good stuff out of the following day. So it wasn't a waste. The day was productive regardless.
And in order to do that, you have to use both sides of the mind. You have to have both the masculine and the feminine side working properly in order to do that. Because you have to be able to have creative problem solving to make it happen. Both sides have to be. Yeah. And then if you follow through, if you use the masculine, logistical side and this sacred feminine creative side properly, and you follow through with that, then that is the third. That's the beloved son. That's the thing that's been created into the universe.
I love that. Yeah. That's amazing. That's like the best case scenario for taking your misfortunes, or maybe you didn't handle something as well as you could have, or maybe you made a really bad mistake. The best thing you can do with that is transmute it into something useful, which is taking the time to reflect and then creating the sun.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, that's fantastic. What are some other rituals? Like, do you have daily rituals that you do that help you? Earlier we were talking about identifying yourself on the mental spectrum of, am I too masculine or am I too feminine? Or we don't even need to use that terminology. It could just be a check-in mentally. Where am I at today and where do I want to be and how do I get there? Do you have any rituals that you do every day that for you personally? I think rituals need to be a personal thing, and I think personal rituals are very important. So do you have anything that you do that for Bear as an individual helps bring you to a more centered space mentally so that you can be the best version of you for the day?
Yeah, so at the beginning of the day, so I have a whiteboard on my desk. And at the beginning of the day, I write down all the goals that I need to hit. And, what's funny is if you listen to, billionaires and millionaires and these guys, it's one of the most consistent things you'll always hear them say is that they'll write down the things that they have to get done. There's a key we use all the time in the mysteries that says "see the end from the beginning." By seeing the end from the beginning, by seeing where you want to get to, you basically you create that. And at some other point, we can kind of get into the logistics on how that works and why it works the way it does. But by just
Mm-hmm.
simply writing down what you want to get done, you increase the likelihood you'll actually get it done by like 1,000%. It's incredible. You write it down, it'll basically get done. It's amazing, and
Wow.
I can't explain it. But at the, sometimes you don't get to it. Like we had a family emergency over the last week, and I couldn't do nearly all the stuff I wanted to. But that's just the way
Mm-hmm.
life is. But then like we're talking about, one of the things, the most valuable thing that I do is at night. So I take a cold shower in the dark, and you're a big advocate for cold showers. I've been doing it since I was in high school. I didn't realize it had all the benefits that it did until actually fairly recently, but I just knew that it always made me feel better and sleep better. So I do kind of I guess you'd call it like a soft meditation, where you're not really, like I'll sit on the pot and kind of just think about what I'm doing or what I did and kind of start relaxing into bedtime, and then take a really cold shower afterwards. And then what I do to make myself extra chilled is I sit in front of the air conditioner and a fan on the edge of my bed, cross-legged, and I'll go through kind of what we just talked about, pondering the things that I've been working on in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what does this mean? How come this is this way? And um, and what happened during the day, and how can I make it better? Really, same thing we just covered, and it's really simple. It takes like 3 seconds, 5 minutes at a push, to write everything down that I want to accomplish. And I have an iPhone, and there's a checklist app that comes with the iPhone. You can just plug what you want in there, and you can just check it off as you go. I'm kind of a tactile
Mm-hmm.
person. I prefer the whiteboard. And then,
Yeah.
it takes, I've been doing it for so long, I don't even really think about it anymore. But doing the ritual not only helps me sleep, it's part of my sleep hygiene, but um, it kind of keeps yourself accountable to yourself, right? It makes sure that you're always on track and you're not slipping into chaos.
Mm-hmm. How quickly does the cold shower take you out of your mind and put you in your body?
Um,
I mean, you've been doing it since high school, so it might be different for you at this point.
it's
But I
super
know that
relaxing.
when I do the cold, man, the little chattering monkey in my head just shuts up instantly.
Mhm.
And that's like a big benefit that I really like about it, is because, I'm a very energetic, sort of neurotic person. So that
Mhm.
helps me tremendously. So the nighttime ritual of cold shower and cold exposure, which is great, by the way. If anybody listening wants more information on how to do cold exposure properly, reach out to Bear and get in touch with me, and I'll set you up. I have a friend who teaches it for a living, and he's fantastic. And he'll talk to just about anybody. So if anybody wants to get in the cold and get the benefits of that mentally, then let us know. But your nighttime routine consists of the cold shower and the reflection,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
That's fantastic. Do you have anything you do in the morning consistently that sets you up for the
So,
day?
the mornings are a little bit more chaotic, and
Because you have kids and a family, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing is looking over the schedule and going over my to-dos. And that doesn't take very long, and it's really easy to do, and anyone could do it if they have a mind to do it. Um, but it's ritual. Our bodies like rituals. Everything's basically run on a clock, and the more times you repeat a ritual, the easier it becomes, the less mind power it requires. Things become a lot more automatic, and things flow a lot easier. So if you develop
Yeah.
good habits early, you save yourself, even though it's a pain in the ass, you save yourself a lot of heartache later on. You really do.
Um, I agree with everything that you just said. I think rituals and routines and habits are super duper important. But, like I said earlier, it's a practice. And I think a lot of people, it's hard to establish good habits. Some people are able to just do it. And I envy those people. I'm not one of them. It's hard to establish. It is. But the cool thing about habits is that that's one of those situations where you can see the end from the beginning. And I think that that's the reason why that's a phrase that's used in the school is because that's about the best advice you could give anybody for dealing with anything. If you have any sort of a problem or something that you need to get done or something you don't know what to do, start by going, what would this look like when it's done? Like, what's the best case scenario? And then work backwards. So with establishing good habits, I think that it's really important to see the end from the beginning and go, okay, I want to start taking a cold shower every night and spending 10 minutes reflecting on my day.
Mm-hmm.
What would my life look like if I did that every single day? The answer is probably awesome. You would probably get really good. You would probably get really good sleep because you can sort of wrap your day up in a nice little box and put it away. Take the good things out of it and put the rest of it away and just kind of be done with it. You're going to sleep better as a result of that. You're not going to be laying in bed tormenting yourself thinking about all the shit that didn't go right that day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to wake up feeling fresh. You're going to wake up 3 days later after dying on the cross and go, okay, I'm going to be better now, right? So seeing the end from the beginning, I wanted to kind of tie that in. I was asking you about your habits and your rituals, but I wanted to throw that in there for people because that, for me, as somebody who struggles with consistency, my life's super chaotic. Seeing the end from the beginning, which is something I learned from the school, has been absolutely fundamental in helping me develop better habits. It's not, I need to do this, this, and that. It's, if I did all these things for X amount of time, what would be the end result? And if the end result isn't a positive thing, there's no way I'm going to execute on that. Mm-hmm. But if I take 5 minutes to visualize what my life would be like if I made this thing a habit, I'm going to be way more likely to execute. And so far, it's been super duper helpful in helping me develop some better habits and just have a better quality of life.
It happens for things in the long term too, even just in the short term. I recently was listening to an interview by Dan Pena. Some of you may know of him, some of you may not. He's called that
fucking guy.
He's an asshole.
He's a class A old school motherfucker, man. Like people, people pay him for him to yell at them. Basically, is what it looks like to me.
They do, but yeah, I mean, he's not someone you're going to get into his good graces. He's an asshole. He's a dick, right? That's just the way it is. But one of the things that's really interesting, he's worth more than $50 billion at this point. He lives in a 15th century Scottish castle. But one of the things that's interesting, you don't get that successful.
Wait, I'm sorry.
What?
I'm sorry, dude. Did you say he lives in a castle?
He does. A 15th century Scottish castle. He lives in Scotland.
Oh my God. He's like I'm sorry, man. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
He's got some ego things going on. But you don't get to be that successful if you don't have some basic understanding of law, right? Some basic understanding of some of these deeper principles, whether he knows it intellectually or not. But one of the things he said is that one of my only regrets in life is that I didn't dream big enough. He says if I dreamed bigger, I would have been more successful. And you're talking, he's one of the most wealthiest people in the world. Right. And he was saying that if he had dreamed bigger, he could have achieved more. And And if you see the end from the beginning, if you set your goals to something way freaking bigger than you would ever conceive of even being practical, right? I'm not gonna. It's like someday you could say, I want to be a professional basketball player. You know,
Hmm.
instead of saying I'm going to be a professional basketball player, I'm going to be a professional basketball player on rocket boots, who's the most, the best at everything. I don't know. I'm not that good. I don't follow sports. I could come up with a better example, but you just if you see the end from the beginning, you automatically, it's a law, and we could go into that in probably a different topic, a different podcast, why it works, but by seeing where you're going, you could prepare before you get there. And
I want to. Would
you
it be
build the road for
okay
yourself.
if we talked about? Sorry. I think that we. I don't know about you, but I think that that's worth talking about right now.
Sure.
Because it's the practical application of law.
Mm-hmm.
And what I believe is happening when we see the end from the beginning, I think that it's visualization, most importantly, right? Fundamentally, that's what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Is we are creating the image of the future and what we want it to look like, right?
Yeah.
Or rather, what does it look like, practically speaking, if I follow this course of action? The other thing that happens when we do visualization is we bring our focus, which is what directs our energy, and we also bring our intention, which is what guides our behavior, right? And somebody once told me that focus plus attention equals magic.
Oh, okay.
in so few words.
Yeah.
I don't want to use the word magic heavily. I'm basically just saying, like, anything that happens that you can't really explain, it to me is magic. And there's nothing wrong with something being mysterious. If positive things are happening to you, don't poke holes in it. Just be like, I don't know, it's magic. So I want to talk about how I think that your listeners and anybody could really, really benefit from hearing a little bit more about visualization and how important that is and how that can help us achieve our goals and direct our actions, in our lives towards things that we want and towards a better quality of life and, just towards a positive experience in general. So what is visualization for you? I'm curious.
So the way the law works is when you want to make effectual change. So when we say magic, when anyone says magic, and it's one of those loaded words. It's either people usually have a mixture of hippy dippy new age bullshit, or they think of cartoons. But really, when someone in the mysteries, a classically trained mystery school initiate would use the word magic, really what we're talking about is effectual change.
Okay.
Really, that's what it is. Really, that's all magic is it's just creating effectual change. And, and the way effectual change happens. And there's actually a formula for this. And if you have a pen and pencil, feel free to write this down. It's concentration rooted in intention through the transfer of energy. All right, I'm going to say that again because it's important. Concentration rooted in intention through the transfer of energy. Or you could even write it as an equation. You could say energy plus time equals change. So if you want to create change in your life, right, you have to be willing to sacrifice to get it, because nothing happens in a vacuum. You don't get anything for nothing. So if you want to be a billionaire, right, if you want to be like the asshole Dan Pena, he'll tell you, you have to be willing to work 18-hour days, 7 days a week. you have to be willing to do that for 20 years. You do that, you will become a billionaire. You will. You come up with an idea, work 18-hour days for 20 years, you will be a billionaire.
And be unrelenting. Don't be afraid to fail and continue persisting.
Yes, exactly. But you have to. So the first thing is you have to know where you're going. Right. If you aim at nothing, you hit it every time. Right. It's you have to know where you're going. Where are you going? What do you want? So like people, I get this email.
What is the end?
So I get emails all the time, and a few of my listeners have gotten this question because I ask it all the time. People will say, "Oh, I want to learn. I want to be part of the mysteries. I want to do this stuff." And I say, "Okay, well, tell me what you want." And you could tell the people who really want to take it seriously because they take a lot of time to answer it. And
it's not an easy question to answer, by the way. I'd answer it too.
No, it's not. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not an easy question because there's a lot of red herrings in there, right? But if you can take the time, weed out the bullshit. So by that I mean, like, some people say, "I want revenge."
Yeah,
or
that's
something.
bullshit.
Yeah, or they say, "I want money." Well, you don't.
No.
Do you really want money, or do you want the money because you actually want something else?
Right? Do you want a material thing, or do you want all the conveniences that come from having money? Right.
Yeah, money is a red herring. Money is just it's a thing that helps you get something else. So you know that's what I mean by a red herring is, and that's a really perfect example. People say, "I want money." Well, what do you want to do with the money? Well, I want to live in Alaska. Well, do you want money or do you want to live in Alaska? Well, you know, really what you want is to live in Alaska. The money is just the only way you can see to get there. But so figure out what you want. And that's what we talk about, like visualization. And that could be anything from deciding to make that cup of coffee, like we were talking about a minute ago. You can't make the cup of coffee without first deciding you wanted a cup of coffee. A cup of coffee isn't going to just fall from heaven out of nowhere and you didn't even know that was a thing. You know, maybe it is, but it's probably not going to happen. So you decide
I would drink heaven coffee if it fell from the sky. I'd be like, "Give me that."
Yeah, so you have to, but you got to know where you're going, right? So, like, figure out what you want and set your dream big. And
I think that we should do it every single day too.
You should. Yeah.
Yeah. What do I want the day to look like?
Exactly. You do it from minute to hour to day to year to lifetime, right? What is it you want to achieve in your life? You know, what is it you want to achieve in this year? What do you want to achieve in the next 3 months? What do you want to achieve in the next month? What do you want to achieve this week, this day, this hour? You know, it's all fractal. When we talk about fractals, that's what we're talking about. It's everything is a pattern. But then once you decide what you want, really what you're doing is you're creating a road. And it's very difficult to explain, but really we're talking about string theory here. And I would sound like an idiot if I tried to explain it. But essentially what you're doing is you're creating a point in space and time, and you create a pathway, a road to get there. Simply by visualizing what you want, there's a roadway that has been laid out to get there. But in order to get there, it requires action, right? It requires actually starting. When I started losing weight, you know, I had to start. You know, you can't just wish something into existence. You have to actually start walking down the road. And and so you have to concentrate, right? Concentration, Concentration is the focus on the goal, and intention is moving your feet, is the freaking getting off your butt and actually making it happen.
Mm-hmm.
And now the energy transfer is all the sacrifice that it takes to get to that point. And the bigger the goal, the bigger the sacrifice. Right? So you have to be willing to sacrifice time. You have to be willing to sacrifice your attention. And if you want to be a billionaire, right, you have to be willing to sacrifice everything. You have to sacrifice your friends, your family, your kids. You know, ask Dan Pena if he has a good relationship with his children. He doesn't. He brags about the fact his children have to make an appointment to see him. Right? That's the kind of guy he is. His kids have to make an appointment to see their dad.
And by the way, I'm assuming that I just want to clarify, you're not glorifying Dan Pena's behavior, but rather using him as a subject of, you know, law and application and how it can create success monetarily.
I do not advocate being like him. No, but he's kind of go ahead.
I want to, this is something I want to just be super transparent with your listeners and hope that it will inspire them to take action in their own lives. I'm currently dealing with a pretty long bout of depression and bad luck. Life has been really, really difficult for me, and I've had to kind of pull myself out of it. And if you're listening to us talk about visualization right now and seeing the end from the beginning and trying to elaborate on that, and your confidence is kind of low because maybe life has been throwing you a lot of curveballs or things aren't going your way, I totally get that. But it is okay to start small. And I want to encourage anybody who's listening, just do it with your day for 3 days in a row. Okay. Wake up in the morning, or, I kind of like doing it the night before because it helps me sleep. I plan out the following day. I go like, what do I need to do? And what do I want the end result of my day to be like? Right. I start with that. And then I go, what needs to happen in order for me to have that outcome? And then I wake up the next day and I already know what's going to happen. And it's a really nice way to start your day. You feel prepared right out of the gate. You wake up and you're like, boom, ready to go. It's very, very common that you'll remember the things that you were contemplating or thinking about before you went to sleep when you wake up. I don't know if you've noticed that or not, but if you have any ideas that were lingering before you fell asleep, they're there when you wake up. So like, plant some good ideas. But if, you know, life is hard and if things are kind of shitty for you right now and you're listening to this, I want you to take your day and just see the end from the beginning with your day, and do it when you wake up or the night before. Either say, today, I want this, and then work backwards, see the end from the beginning. I want today to be this way, and then figure out what needs to happen in order for that outcome to take place. And then make that checklist like you were talking about earlier, Bear, and check those fucking things off. Do it for 3 days and see what happens. Build your confidence up and put this theory to the test, because Bear and I are both saying that if you see the end from the beginning, you can basically engineer your life. But it doesn't need to be on this grand scale of like, I want to make $1 billion. Just start with the day and see. It's a skill. It's something you have to practice. Do it day by day for a little while. And once you become really consistent at that, start setting some bigger goals. What do I want to get done this month? What do I want to get done this quarter? What do I want to get done in this relationship? What do I want to get done at work? Right? It can get bigger from there. But just like anything, it's a skill. It doesn't just happen. You have the ability to do it because you have a brain and you're a human being, but it's something that you have to get familiar with and you have to practice regularly in order for it to produce results. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. And that's
so like, if anybody's listening to this, do it for 3 days. I just want to encourage anybody to do that. 3 days, plan your day out, see the end from the beginning, and set some steps, what needs to happen in order to get there, and see what happens.
And, you know, my listeners will laugh, you know, because it's like my catchphrase, you know, you got to, in order to make this work, you got to do the work. You know, you got to do the work. You have to, you know, depression is a bitch. It is.
That's
you
the
know,
worst. Yeah.
People who haven't really struggled with depression, you know, both my parents were diagnosed with bipolar disorder type 2. Type 1 is a mood swing towards mania. Type 2 is a mood swing towards depression. And I don't know, I was never diagnosed, but I at least inherited some major component of that. Like I definitely struggle with that in my life. But, um, you know, one of the benefits of doing the checklist, developing ritual, and sticking to it even when you don't feel like it, is it'll help you get out of your funk. One of the things that is really awful about depression is people think that depression is just being sad. Depression isn't really sadness. It's more like apathy. It's more like extreme apathy. And apathy just means I just don't care. Um, and and it can be physically painful. And anyone who's struggled with it, I mean, it's a bitch. But just sometimes it's just a mind over matter thing. Deciding that you're not going to let it rule you. You're going to get up. You're going to do what you have to do anyway, and just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and do it. And you find actually that if you do your shit, it actually helps your depression. It seems kind of backwards, but getting up and just doing what you're supposed to do is better for the depression than staying in bed. It feels like it's easier to stay in bed, but it's not. It's actually worse for you. It's easier, but worse for you.
I want to comment on that because, like I just said earlier, I've been dealing with seasonal depression. It happens to me every fall pretty consistently. It's a cycle, just like everything else. And I'm fortunate enough that this year I was able to see that it's a cycle and not put so much emphasis on it, because I realized that, this happens to me every year. It's totally normal and it's going to go away. And just being able to identify that was super helpful. But I want to attest to everything that you just said about physically doing it. So I would say that depression is rooted in your mind, although it does have physical effects. Would you agree?
Mm-hmm.
It's very much a conflict of the mind. It's basically your intelligence is turned against you, and now it's telling you all the things that aren't true. And it's reaffirming all these negative beliefs that you have and sort of paralyzing you and preventing you from taking action. So the best way to fix your mind is to physically do something with your body, because they're connected. Mm-hmm. Just like earlier we said, I commented and I said that the best way to improve your mental state is to do something physically with your body. You have to use the two in conjunction to balance the other. You can't think your way out of a depression. It doesn't work. I've tried.
Mm-hmm.
The same way you can't, exercise your way out of sickness. You just have to mentally accept the fact that you're sick and relax and change your state that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I love the fact that you just said that you need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and take action, because what you're talking about is using your physical body and interacting with your experience of reality in order to change your mental state.
Mm-hmm. If you remember, go ahead. If you remember that you're actually, there's a slight delay. If you remember that there's your three parts and they're both connected. You're not your body, you're not your mind, you're not your ego. But each one affects the other. They all live in the same house. So if you're like super fighting depression, go look in the mirror and smile at yourself. You'll feel fucking ridiculous doing it. Trust me, you'll feel like an idiot. But it works. It really does. If you look at yourself in the mirror and say, I love you, I think you're awesome. You're telling this to yourself, I love me. I think I'm awesome. I'm amazing. Give yourself a big old smile. And even though you feel terrible on the inside, if you do those, even though it feels false, if you do them on the outside, your mind will follow, because all of them each part is connected to the other.
Yeah,
that's my advice.
Absolutely.
That's how I do it.
Yeah. I've been learning to check in with myself, and with those three aspects, I go, how's my mind today? And just as an example, because I've been depressed, how's my mind today? Most of the day, it's like, it's not great. I check in with my ego. how's my ego doing today? Can I use my ego to fix my mind? Can I like psych myself up or, like encourage myself in some way? No, that's not great either. Depression is such that your ego actually turns against you in my experience, and it tells you all the things that you're not. So the only thing that's left is, how's my body? Well, my body's still perfectly capable. So I'm going to use my body to fix my mind and my ego. So I'm going to go exercise, like go for a walk even. It doesn't need to be anything crazy, or take a cold shower, or I'll go hop in the hot tub. I'll do some yoga, some breathing exercises, using one aspect of you to balance the other two. Mm-hmm. And the same goes, it works in a full circle. It's a dynamic relationship between the three. My physical body feels like shit. Okay. And how's my mind on that? Well, my mind is sitting here going, I don't feel good. I don't feel good. Okay. Well, how's my ego? My ego is like, yeah, dude, you're sick. People get sick. That's fine. You need to chill. Right. So now I'm using my ego to improve the status, or improve my mental and physical state by allowing myself to relax. Right. That practice in itself for me has been fundamental in helping with depression. And I think it's cool that we're talking about this, because it is fall, and I think a lot of people get seasonal depression. I'm pretty sure that's a common thing now, man.
Yeah, I think so too.
You were talking about smiling in the mirror and how effective that is. We actually have scientific research to prove that. I'm sure people are familiar with power poses. Are you familiar with those, Bear?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So like, I love Tony Robbins. They're immensely helpful, man. Like, we have scientific research that shows us that just conducting yourself physically and holding a posture for a couple of minutes improves your biochemistry. They would take blood samples of people, they would have them do things and can like hunch their body over, sit down, hang their head, breathe, take shallow breaths. They would have them do that for 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. They would take a blood sample. They would analyze it to see what the hormone levels were like, right? Mm-hmm. Then they would have the same group of people stand in a power pose for a couple of minutes, and then they would draw blood from them and analyze the hormones in that. And it's a definite difference in every single human. Like, it's the evidence is conclusive that you can use your physical body to improve your mental and emotional state. Something as simple as smiling in the mirror can make you feel better and make you more balanced hormonally and improve the hormones that make you feel good. I love Tony Robbins. This is something that he says all the time, and I learned it from him. He just says, if you feel really shitty, I just want you to like acknowledge the fact that you feel shitty, but I want you to think about how would you posture yourself, and what would your body language be like if you felt great? And do that for 60 seconds and tell me if you don't feel better.
Heck yeah, man.
And yeah, man, even just like driving in the car, if I'm having a bad day, I'm like, oh, I'm having a bad day. And as much as I can, like, this is where awareness and concentration come into play. If you can catch yourself going, meh, 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 I'm having a bad day, look at your body. What are you doing with your body? Are you hunched over? Are you drooping? Are your shoulders up? Right? Fix your shoulders, sit up straight, and smile. Right? Or even force yourself to laugh, even if nothing is funny. Little tricks like that can improve your state pretty much instantaneously. It's insane, man.
And so
it's just about being able to do it.
And I know we've been going for a while now. We should probably wrap this up here before too long.
Yeah.
But one of the things, and maybe we could talk more about this next time we do this, but there's a huge misconception of what... So one of the things that we talked about in the mysteries a lot, and I know they discuss this in yoga quite a bit even, is when I'm referring to myself, which part of me is actually me? And one of the things you learn pretty early on is that you are not your mind and you are not your body. So you could almost think of it as like, you and I were actually talking on the phone really recently. I think maybe it was even just a week or two ago. And we were like, okay, so the ego is like a boat. And the mind is like the rudder. And you're sitting in the boat. But you could also say that, like the mind is the rudder and your body is the boat and you're sitting in the boat. And different things, different spirits, different energies, different things have access to the same boat. or you can even think of it like a house even. Your mind is like a house, your body is like a house, and different things have access to it. And so the question is, which one of those things are you? And when you realize that things like depression and mood swings, fears, anxieties, these are all functions of something that is not you. That's one of the earliest, for me, that was one of the first times that I actually realized I could actually be free. Because you realize that these things aren't actually happening to me, they're happening to my body. And so you take it as like a science project. It's like, oh, I'm feeling really depressed right now. No, wait a minute. No, my body is feeling depressed right now. Okay. So how do I fix? It's like my car is broken. Okay, so I gotta, my body is feeling depressed right now. What tools do I have at my disposal to make my body feel better? And if you treat your body and you treat your mind as something that is external than yourself, that is something that you, the real you, just has access to and is using, it makes a lot of these things a lot easier to deal with, because it's not something that's happening to you personally, it's something that's happening to the things that you are in possession of. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, man. And I think that, if people enjoyed our conversation, I would love to talk to you about the idea of duality and separateness.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's one of the first things that you learn in yoga. The first time you have a true experience of yoga, is to realize that the phrase that I heard recently that I've adopted, it's the capital S self.
Mm.
That's actually you are fundamentally the part of you that is constantly there even when you're asleep. The part of you that's dreaming is your conscious awareness. That's the capital S self. That's the you that exists independent of your mind and your body, like you were just saying.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I would love to talk more about that, because that's a really profound idea. The reason why I fell in love with yoga is because it's a physical thing that you can do that gives you that experience of separateness once it's done.
Well,
you realize that you aren't your body.
You started yoga because you were working in a shitty job at the time, wasn't that right?
Oh man, I was part owner of a massive restaurant, and I was also the acting general manager, and I was suicidal, and I had chronic anxiety and depression, and I was just in about as bad a shape as somebody who's quote unquote successful could be. I had lots of money coming in. I just purchased a big house. I just gotten married. I had cars, boats. I had all these things that I, was told that would make me happy, but I was fucking miserable. And one of the guys that I worked with wouldn't stop bothering me about doing yoga. He was the bar manager at the time. And I just said, like, dude, if I do yoga for 5 days in a row, will you leave me alone and stop fucking talking about yoga? And he was like, yeah. And he was like, yes, I will. And I made it 3 days. I made it 3 days, man. And I was like, I see why you wanted me to do yoga, and I don't think I'll ever stop doing it. And he just smiled like a smug motherfucker and walked away. But that's another story I'd love to share. And yoga is it's my passion for sure. So, and I would love to talk more about that.
But you want to talk about doing something physically to affect your mind and get yourself out of that nonsense. I mean, there you have it.
Yeah.
It's real world experience.
And yeah, it's never been easier to try either. There's I'm an exception and probably sort of a blasphemy at the same time, because I go to yoga classes regularly, fairly regularly. I just kind of drop in and do a class and leave. And people always ask me how long I've been practicing, because apparently my postures are pretty good. I am entirely YouTube yoga taught, man. All of the yoga that I practice, the actual physical postures, up to this point have been YouTube. like just me in my living room at my house.
Nice.
It's not the way you're supposed to learn. It's not kosher and it's not formal, but it works. And it's never been easier to practice it. So like I would encourage anybody to just give it a try. There's so many good resources out there. If you have a cell phone and a blanket, you can do yoga and you can get the benefits of it right now in like 15 minutes.
We'll try after we get off the phone here. I'll get like some of your contact information, like your email and some of the links of the people that you used, and we'll have that in the description boxes too, so that if you're interested, you can look it up if that's something that you're interested in.
I'm highly accessible at this point, so if any of your listeners are curious about yoga or they want some guidance or they have questions at all, I'll give you my phone number. I really will. I'm happy to meet people who are interested and help them get started on the journey, or at least encourage them to try it and understand what it is. So if anybody's curious, like just reach out to me and we'll make it happen. I'll give you all the resources you need.
Awesome.
Yeah, man.
Well, I think that's probably actually a good stopping spot.
I hope so.
So
I hope people listening got something of value out of our conversation.
Yeah, I hope so too. But this is fun though. I mean, like we said, that we do this on a fairly regular basis, you and I. It's been really kind of cool to be able to just really all we did that was different is we just hit record and acknowledge that there's someone listening.
Yeah,
that's really the only difference. So again, this is Jason. He's starting a podcast here real soon called Rogue Elephant, and he's part of the same mystery school that I am a part of. So we kind of run in similar circles. And is there anything you want to say before we go?
No, if anybody's listening and they stuck with us for the full however long this was, I just want to say thank you for giving us your time, and I hope that you got something out of this that will make your life a little bit better.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here, you guys, and you know who I am. I'm Bear, and I look forward to doing this again with you, Jason. Thank you.
Yes, sir. It was my pleasure.
All right.